also, being Uyghur, it's hard not to be political when you are born into politics itself.
61-year-old Ni Xia Lian, otherwise known as Auntie Ni, used to play for the Chinese national team in the 80s.
Wow, 661 and an Olympian.
Yes, she's actually...
What's up, people? It's time for another episode of RFA Insider.
That was Eugene, I'm Amy, and today on RFA Insider...
First, we'll check in with the Uyghur service to find out why Uyghur youth are covertly getting their message out on social media.
Then, in a post-Olympics edition, we ask why Olympic table tennis resulted in controversy in China.
Then, continuing the Olympics theme, we will talk Taiwan and national anthems, but then go down the rabbit hole and end up with a very visibly disturbed Vladimir Putin.
But first, we're talking memes, makeup tutorials, and covert messaging to raise awareness about what's happening in the Uyghur region on how it's made.
어떻게 만들었지? 怎么做的? How it's made?
We are Uyghurs. Of course we're always late. We are Uyghurs. Of course we don't have basic human rights. We are Uyghurs. Of course China is selling our organs.
We're Uyghurs. Of course we don't know if the families are alive or not.
We are Uyghurs. Of course nobody can guess my nationality.
We're Uyghurs. Of course we're suffering from a genocide in 2024.
So today, joining us in the studio, we have Shahrazad from the Uyghur service, and she is the radio production coordinator here. So thank you for joining us, Shahrazad.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and welcome to the podcast. Shahrazad is the first person from the Uyghur service to join us on RFA Insider. Can you explain what we just heard?
So we just heard Uyghur youth talking about a very viral TikTok trend. We are Uyghurs, of course, All right, let's unpack what we just watched in that video. It's part of a viral campaign by 3 young Uyghur girls based in Germany. They cleverly used the of-course trend to shed light on the genocide facing the Uyghur people. It's a 37 seconds long video. These girls mixed humor with some really serious truths about their cultural identity and the struggles Uyghurs face in China. They kicked off with some lighthearted stereotypes like joking about always being late because, we are Uyghurs, of course. But then they swiftly shift to more sobering realities. One of them says, we are Uyghurs, of course, we don't have basic human rights. Now, this is highlighting the tough conditions many Uyghurs endure under Chinese government's rule. And another adds, we are Uyghurs, of course China is selling our organs. It's really harsh reality, and we have to say it in a jokingly manner, referencing the troubling reports of organ harvesting. This video was posted by the Uyghur Youth Initiative. They are based in Germany. And this video was taken right after a major pro-Uyghur protest in Munich. And let me tell you, it made waves. Over 3.2 million people viewed it on TikTok and 7.5 million hits on Instagram. The mix of humor and serious messages, they really grabs attention and makes people think about China's horrific treatment of Uyghurs. And one of the girls, Muqaddas Mehmed, she explained why they use humor. And she says that if the people only focus on the heavy stuff, the listeners or the viewers, they might not gonna stay very long time because they don't really like listening to heavy stuff on social media. Most people don't. So by keeping it engaging and adding a bit more humor, they're making sure people are sticking to the message in a humorous way, but also this is engaging and adding a bit more humor. So they're making sure this is getting a lot of support from different people and the video goes viral. And this is the way that now the Uyghur youth are amplifying awareness of the ongoing Uyghur genocide and support and gaining support from different walks of people.
So I imagine this is like a creative way to get the message out. If they had made just a standard video with a guy in a suit with all these college books behind him saying, well, let me tell you what's happening in the Uyghur region. China is doing all these atrocities. It would probably have not been as popular and not have gone as viral. So this approach is better.
So A previous video involving a Muslim woman doing a makeup tutorial showed her talking about what she called the Uyghur genocide while curling her eyelashes.
Hi guys, so I'm going to teach you guys how to get long lashes. So the first thing you need to do is grab your lash curler, curl your lashes obviously, then you're going to put them down and use your phone that you're using right now to search up what's happening in China, how they're getting concentration camps, throwing innocent Muslims in there, separating their families from each other, kidnapping them, murdering them, raping them, forcing them to eat pork, forcing them to drink, forcing them to convert different religions, if not, or else they're gonna, of course, get murdered. People that go into these concentration camps don't come back alive. This is another Holocaust, yet no one is talking about it. Please be aware. Please spread awareness. And yeah, so you can grab your lash curler again. And
why is it necessary to spread awareness in this manner? And why not just come out with it?
That's a very good question, Amy. You know, the need to sneak in awareness about critical issues like the Uyghur genocide comes down to a few important reasons. The video that you're referencing to is she's an Afghan-American girl named Feroza Aziz.
Oh, so she's not Uyghur at all?
This video is posted by the American Afghan girl, I remember. Okay. Yes, so this was back in November 2019. She posted a makeup tutorial on TikTok that took a surprising turn. First off, there is the issue of TikTok censorship. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys are aware about social media platforms, especially those with lots of Chinese users or ties to China. They tend to block or take down content that criticizes the Chinese government. So if you talk directly about sensitive topics like the Uyghur genocide, your video might get removed. So your account suspended and your content buried. So no one gonna see it if you just directly go and start talking about Uyghur genocide. By hiding these important messages in something unrelated like makeup tutorial, creators can bypass these restrictions and get their messages out there for more people to view.
But I wonder, at the same time, though, if you don't label the video in that way, wouldn't it also be difficult to find? Like maybe people who are not interested in eyelash videos will never look at that video, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
eyelash videos.
That is true. But I think the audience engage with different things that comes up to your For You page nowadays. So, hey, there's my eyelash curling on and I'm curling my eyelashes, and then she directly goes to the Uyghur issue. Right. So it's about 3 seconds. So let's say if you watch video about 7 seconds for each video, you still can hear at least the Uyghur part of some parts in that video. So I think it still helps to reach wider audience.
So it's kind of a give and take because you're going to reach some people that maybe you didn't even intend to reach, and that's good. That's how to get the message out in a way that I guess cannot be tracked as easily.
And people have short attention spans. They're more likely to watch something that catches their interest. By mixing important messages into popular formats like makeup tutorials, the creators can hold the audience attention better. So Firuza starts her video with eyelash curling tips, which draws viewers in, and then she switches to talking about the Uyghur genocide. It surprises the viewers, and then making them more likely to pay attention to the
or at least
serious part of the message.
Right. Are there any other examples that you know of that people have done the similar thing?
They have tried memes. They have tried using also a lot of cooking videos that you can also talk about how the Chinese propaganda portrays the Uyghur food, Uyghur cuisine as part of their culture, their cuisine. So by using cooking, it's also actually a good idea.
That's a good one. I'm always looking at cooking videos whenever I'm cooking to try to figure out how to do stuff. But let's back up, though, because we're talking about these issues in the Uyghur region, but there are some people that don't actually know who the Uyghurs are. Like, for example, in a recent trip to New York, I was visiting with some people that I know, and we wanted to go out for Chinese food, and we were debating the various places we could go, either in Chinatown in Manhattan, or there's another Chinatown in Queens. And one of the people we were with, she likes to be a good host and explain what everything is. And one of the places she searched was a Uyghur restaurant, and she explained, it's like Western Chinese food. And immediately I said, no, you can't say it's Chinese food, it's Uyghur food. And she's like, well, who are the Uyghurs? Like, I've never heard of that before. And she's like, those are the people that live in Western China, right? So, I wonder, would most Uyghurs take offense to being identified as, quote unquote, Western Chinese, or even Chinese in general? And is it only the most politically minded who stress about that, or is it more widespread?
Uyghurs will indeed be offended if you call them Western Chinese or even just Chinese. And this feeling is pretty widespread.
Okay.
Let me explain why. Chinese means Han Chinese, Han ethnic Chinese group in China. So Uyghurs, Tibetans, Mongols, they don't identify as Chinese.
Right.
And historically, we are not part of China. We were separate independent countries. So Uyghurs have a distinct culture, linguistic, and historical identity. That's very different from Han Chinese. So saying Uyghur food or culture is Chinese, it kind of erases that unique identity. And then there's a political angle.
Yeah.
Calling Uyghurs Western Chinese, it really fits into the Chinese government's narrative that Uyghurs are just another part of China, which they use to justify their oppressive policies. So by rejecting this label, Uyghur people are resisting this forced assimilation and culture erasure. And then furthermore, considering China's ongoing genocide in the Uyghur region, it's really important to recognize and respect the distinct identity. Calling them Chinese, it really glosses over their struggle and the oppression they're facing, and then on a global scale. Correcting this misunderstanding, as you are doing, Eugene, very good job, and accurately representing Uyghurs, they help build international support for their human rights. And then it's about making sure people understand who Uyghurs really are and what they're going through.
Okay, well, I have to admit that prior to working at Radio Free Asia, I didn't know very much about the Uyghurs other than they were people that existed. And so I didn't think about it that often. And I guess working at Radio Free Asia, you hear about the Uyghur issues all the time. So that's why I was more aware of the issue. But outside of Radio Free Asia, I guess my point is that most people don't think about it or even know because there's not enough education about that.
Well, I thought it was interesting that you had the restaurant anecdote because before joining Radio Free Asia, the only time I had heard of Uyghurs was when I went to Taiwan, and Uyghur food was really popular there for a while.
Cool.
So it's just like, oh yeah, it's like, more like lamb and like cumin and stuff. But like you don't really know much beyond that, just like culinaries.
Yeah.
Culture. So shifting a bit from the previous question, if we may go a bit more into the history part of the Uyghur region. On most maps of China or the world, the region is labeled as Xinjiang province, but Uyghurs call the region East Turkestan. So what is East Turkestan, and when exactly did China come to control the area?
Very tough, but good question, Amy. So when we look back PRC, let's think about the PRC is founded on the territory of Manchu Qing dynasty, Manchu Qing Empire. Okay, so after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Communist China fears the same fate that happened to the Soviet Union to happen to them. And then when we talk about Uyghur region, it's usually marked on the map as Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. But the Uyghur themselves call it East Turkestan. This difference in names is really important because it highlights the Uyghur people's historical and cultural identity. It's separate from Chinese control. East Turkestan has a rich history as a crossroad of different civilization because it's part of the Silk Road. And the region has been home to various ethnic groups, primarily the Uyghur people. We also have Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Uzbek, and other 13 different nationalities in the Uyghur region as well.
Okay.
They're all Turkic-speaking, majority Muslim people. Historically, East Turkestan was an independent state with its own unique culture, language, and tradition. The story of Chinese control over the region is back in the Manchu Qing dynasty. They first took control over East Turkestan in the 18th century, but this control was often weak, and it met often with resistance from the Uyghur people. In the early 20th century, there were brief periods when East Turkestan declared independence, notably in 1933 and again in 1944. However, these independent states didn't last long because a military intervention and occupation by both the Chinese nationalist government and then later on by the communist government, and both supported by the Stalin Soviet Union.
Wait, the communist Chinese government was supported by the Soviet Union?
So the occupation of East Turkestan was assisted by the Soviet Union, aiding the Chinese Communist Party to be able to take over the land successfully.
I see. So this is going to be a very stupid question, but if you call it East Turkestan, that implies that there is a West Turkestan or just Turkestan somewhere. Is that the case?
So we refer East Turkestan to the region that we're from. But if you say, then where's West Turkestan? You will look at East Turkestan from Central Asia point of view.
Okay.
Instead of China's point of view, you will see that Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan.
Oh, so those areas
These
would be West
areas used to be all part of the Turkic nation.
Okay.
So Soviet Union collapsed, all the Central Asian countries turned into 16 different countries.
So
we can no longer recognize them as Western Turkey, if that makes sense. So
Western Turkey. Well, Turkey would be Western Turkey, right?
So Turkestan for us is now considered the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region,
right?
Due to the historical referencing to the land being under the one Turkic nation back in the days.
Right. Okay, so sorry for my ignorance.
That's a very good question. So people do often ask me, where's the other part of your Turkestan go?
Okay. So this history goes back really far. You did mention like the PRC, that's of course the People's Republic of China, and then you also mentioned the nationalist government, which is the current government that controls only Taiwan. Would that be correct? The Republic of China.
Amy will be a better person to answer.
Ooh, we might get podcast free Asia for this. I think you might be referring to the KMT, which fled
the Kuomintang,
into Taiwan.
So before 1949, they were still very heavy on the controlling of East Turkestan and then Communist China.
So the policy didn't change, even though the government
kind of just took control over after they left. So.
But, communist governments are supposed to be more egalitarian and more welcoming of differences between peoples.
On paper.
But that appears not to be the case here.
Even the name, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, you must know it's not autonomous at all.
Oh, definitely. And autonomous regions now, there are several within the territory controlled by the People's Republic of China. I have to be very careful with how I say. I can't say within China. I have to say around the territory controlled by the People's Republic of China. There are other autonomous areas, including in Tibet. And then I think in the northeast, there's Yanbian Korean Autonomous County or something like that. So I'm not sure what the designation autonomous necessarily means when it's not really autonomous.
It's not. Yeah. And the Xinjiang means in Chinese new territory.
Right.
So they referring that Xinjiang is part of them, but then you're naming it as a new territory.
Right. So it's almost like it's saying this is the frontier.
Yes.
Right? We have to subdue.
It's to symbolize their colonialization and control. Right. And they prefer, calling it different so that people like Uyghurs, they don't recognize their history no more after years. So my generation people, they don't know East Turkestan at all until they go to a free country where they have free information access to be able to understand this.
Well, one thing where I actually noticed what East Turkestan was, we went to the Washington Muslim Center, which is on Massachusetts Avenue, and they have like flags of all the different Muslim nations in front of it. And then there's the blue one with the crescent and the star. My son's like, hey, what's that flag? I'm like, I don't really know. And I'm looking on my phone, blue flag with a white crescent. And it says, oh, it's the East Turkestan flag that the Uyghurs use. Okay. And then I explained that to him. He's like, but that's not a country. And I'm like, well, it is, but
the name East Turkestan isn't just a geopolitical term for Uyghur people. It symbolizes the Uyghurs' distinct identity there and their ongoing struggle for, having their own independent country and against the Chinese domination.
Right. Right. Okay, so the current situation in the Uyghur region has been described as genocide. And of course, we at RFA hear about what's going on there often. But for the benefit of our listeners, can you explain in detail, briefly, exactly what has been going on there and how China is framing it, and why some define it as genocide and while others might not?
The situation in the Uyghur region, also known as East Turkestan, has been widely described as genocide. Both the U.S. government, Congress, along with nearly a dozen Western parliaments have officially recognized it as Uyghur genocide. Additionally, the United Nations has stated that the actions in the Uyghur region constitute crimes against humanity. So the Chinese government has implemented harsh policies targeting the Uyghurs in the Uyghur region, and there are reports that over 2 million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities have been detained in internment camps. Some reports suggest that the number could be higher than 2 million people. These figures are based on satellite imagery, leaked government documents, and testimonies from former detainees and their families, as well as research conducted by human rights organizations and academic institutions. Inside the internment camps, people are forced to undergo political indoctrination. This is just the light part. The heavier part is they go through really sterilization, forced labor, and organ harvesting, and they're being sent to this really, it's a forced labor, slave labor camps to being forced to work in under really terrible conditions. There's also evidence of forced sterilization, as I mentioned, and birth control and forced abortion. It's aimed to reduce the Uyghur population as much as possible. The Chinese government has severely restricted religious practices. Uyghur people cannot even name their own kid Uyghur religious name. You cannot name your children
And
Muhammad or Medina.
As I understand it, China is saying that these are like vocational centers to...
China frames it that they use this action against the Uyghur people as counter-terrorism measure. They say there is terrorist attacks, but it was the Uyghur people fighting against the Chinese harsh policies against them. Then they portrayed the camps also as vocational training centers. They said that these centers aimed at improving economic opportunities and integrating Uyghurs into the Chinese society. The Chinese officials frequently highlight what they call the positive outcomes. They say the infrastructure is improved, the economic development in the region is nice. And these narratives, they just serve to mask the atrocity being committed against the Uyghur people. And they try to divert the attention away from the widespread human rights abuses and systematic repression the Uyghur people face. And why do you think some call it genocide and others don't? Is because the term genocide is heavy and that carries a lot of significance.
Yeah.
Legal and moral implications. Those who describe the situation as genocide, they are like the U.S. government, the Congress, and the Western Parliament. They recognize it, but then there are other countries like the third world countries, the Muslim majority countries. They have really strong ties to the Chinese government with using One Belt, One Road initiative and other initiatives where the Chinese government heavily invests money into these third world countries. So when they take the money, they don't want to talk bad about China. So they do not say what's happening to the Uyghur people that's genocide or crime against humanity. They applaud what China is doing and they say it's a good thing even.
Do they acknowledge at all that something like terrible is happening to the Uyghur people and just hold off on taking the step into acknowledging it as genocide, or do they just not?
Not the government itself, but there are like different human rights organizations in the region that they will conduct investigation or to help raise awareness, but none of the government has spoken when there is a voting that is against China. Predominantly Muslim majority countries, they vote in favor of. So
one thing you mentioned was the forced sterilization and forced birth control and forced abortions. From what I gather from doing work with the Mandarin and Cantonese services is that China is very concerned about its...
one-child policy?
Yeah, the after effects of the one-child policy and the fact that it has an aging population and the population is shrinking. And so it seems very counterintuitive to me if you consider officially under the dogma of the PRC that the Uyghurs should be good citizens of the PRC and, equal with Han Chinese, that you wouldn't want to reduce their population because they should contribute to population growth, right? So that's obviously very hypocritical then when you're saying that, obviously these people are not seen as equals if they're trying to decrease the population when they have a population crisis coming up.
Yes. So for Uyghur people, they used to have, if you're in a majority city located, then you can have 2 kids. If you're in the rural area where you farm, then you're allowed to have
so you're saying the one-child
children.
policy did not apply to
Back
Uyghurs?
it still applied, but in a way that we were, as a minority, considered a minority in our own region. We were allowed to have 2 kids.
Okay.
Or when you're a farmer, you're allowed to have up to 4. But then more than that is heavily fined and sterilization and just forced abortion. But what are you saying now is while the Han Chinese people may able to have more than 1 kid, but the Uyghurs are still forcefully getting sterilized and they are not allowed to have more than 2. If the measures work, you may think, maybe allow them to have more than 2 kids, but it's predominantly for the Han Chinese population, not so much for the minorities in the region.
Right. Another aspect of PRC control over Tibet and the Uyghur region has been the erasure of cultural identity. And I guess both the services always are talking about that a lot, especially like in Tibet, for example, they are bringing in Mandarin as the language of instruction, and that is making it such that Tibetans are unable to speak in Tibetan, and there are fewer people that are speaking it natively, and eventually it's going to die out, and they're afraid of that. But if my understanding of the situation is correct, in the Uyghur region, past iterations of the government actually encouraged Uyghur education and promoted Uyghur studies, but now high-profile Uyghur studies professionals who were once in the favor of the PRC government, they're now targeted by the government. So why was there a sudden switch in priorities?
You're right. Historically, the PRC did encourage Uyghur education, and they even promoted Uyghur studies to some extent. And during the early decades of communist rule, there was a period where the government seemed to recognize the importance of cultural diversity within the borders. They allowed and even supported Uyghur culture and education. It's like educational initiatives that helps the Uyghur scholars and professionals to enjoy a level of respect and prominence. However, things have changed drastically in recent years. This shift really started to escalate with the rise of Xi Jinping and his administrations. They focused on tightening control all aspects of the society. The government's approach to the Uyghur region shifted from a kind of cautious engagement to outright repression. And one of the key reasons for this change is the Chinese government's growing emphasis on the national unity and the elimination of any potential threats to their control. And they start to view the Uyghur culture as, if you celebrate your distinct Uyghur identity, they see it as a threat to their control and their homogeneous Chinese identity. And the high-profile Uyghur academics and professionals who were once celebrated by the Chinese government, they began to see as the Chinese government portrayed them as a potential leader of resistance or separatist to the region. So the government started to see the prominent Uyghur culture and education as a challenge to their authority in the region, and they began to crack down on these activists. And this crackdown has included targeting high-profile Uyghur intellectuals and scholars who were previously the Chinese government's favor, and then they accused them of separatism or extremism. Many have been detained, forced disappeared, or severely punished under these accusations. This shift, though, Eugene, that it reflects the government's broader strategy of assimilating the Uyghur people and erasing their distinct cultural identity in the name of national unity and security.
So I guess if we were to make a comparison between, we have multiculturalism in the U.S., and that's not perfect either. There's lots of problems here where people can't seem to get along with each other. But in comparison, it seems like in China, then the government is basically trying to, beat the multiculturalism out of people in order to make them forced to be one people, right?
Under one umbrella. It's Han Chinese identity is the utmost respected. So everybody is, even if you don't want to, you're forcefully assimilated into a Han Chinese identity.
Yeah.
When you cannot even name your own kids the name that you want to name, what other human rights you have left?
So this one is more like a personal question for you. But a study conducted in Hong Kong showed that social unrest led to rates of PTSD and depression similar to those seen in areas of war and armed conflict. And then on top of that, researchers found that heavy use of social media following socio-political events seemed to increase the risk of developing depression and PTSD. And for you and others in the Uyghur service, you're not really able to disengage from the news of what's happening in the Uyghur region. So how do you handle the emotional toll that comes with your work? And has working here changed how you engage with social media at all?
Well, we're deeply committed to reporting on human rights abuses in the Uyghur region, while also safeguarding our mental well-being. Many of our colleagues have faced unimaginable personal consequences, such as having family members detained, imprisoned, and forcefully disappeared by the Chinese government in retaliation for their work. And the emotional toll of covering such intense and distressing topics is undeniably challenging. And since 2017, I can say roughly at least 50 family members of the Uyghur journalists at Radio Free Asia Uyghur Service have been detained, imprisoned, or disappeared. Some have been released, but none of the Uyghur journalists have had any chance to contact their loved ones back home since then, and they face constant retaliation from the Chinese government. And despite this harrowing experience and the ongoing threats to their families, Uyghur service journalists continue to produce unbiased, factual, and groundbreaking news programs to highlight the Uyghur genocide. And their dedication ensured that the world remains informed about the ongoing Uyghur genocide. So regarding social media, it is becoming a vital tool for disseminating information and connecting with supporters globally. But it's also a double-edged sword. Like, on one hand, it allows you to identify and amplify our messages and mobilize support. And then on the other hand, the constant exposure to negative content, it can take a toll on your mental health. And I become more mindful. I definitely am. When I engage with social media, I set boundaries now. I prioritize self-care, and iPhone is very smart now. They remind you still got 10 minutes to your quiet mood, or it asks me for, do you want to turn on your do not disturb? And I use that to set boundaries, and I tell myself, okay, it's time to just rest. And I think how I approach is just I balance the advocacy with personal well-being. And while I'm trying to stay on top of the news, I also know that this is my home time, that I get to be just Shehrazad, the Uyghur girl, not Shehrazad, the Uyghur radio production coordinator.
Right.
So yeah, I think finding that sweet balance and maintaining, a positive kind of reaction towards things is important too, because it's a very heavy and negative topic. So how are you going to how are you going to be positive when it's so negative? It's something that you will have to figure it out what works for you personally.
Okay. I'm going to ask you some questions that are now not on the script.
Yeah.
So you've been involved in many diaspora communities on, 3 different continents. Is that correct? Okay.
So which continents, Eugene?
Oh, Australia,
Europe,
Europe, and North America, right?
Yeah.
And I guess Asia counts too, but I mean,
yes. But I couldn't do any
Right.
work there.
So I'm curious. Every time that I've ever been in any situation around Uyghurs, even if it's just a social thing, politics is very heavily involved in that. I'm sure that there are events where Uyghurs just meet each other and don't talk about the situation and just, socially.
Yeah, during weddings. Weddings will be just celebration of life and family, and can be less political, I think. Mm-hmm. But it also depends. Let's say if you got married. Let's say if I got married in America and my parents cannot come.
Okay.
My dad is detained. So that in itself is also another political situation because of the Chinese government's restriction and the retaliation towards my work. They will not let my father to go overseas and come attend my wedding. So that can be political. So being Uyghur, it's hard not to be political when you are born into politics itself.
Right.
I'm a bit painfully aware that we've been pronouncing Uyghur and Uyghur differently throughout the whole interview. And we probably should have had this question at the very beginning. But they can learn from our mistakes. Yes. Could you teach us the correct way to pronounce Uyghur or Uyghur?
Okay, here we go. So Uyghur is pronounced Uyghur. Uyghur.
Good.
Uyghur.
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 You guys doing a good job. There's still some practicing.
Yeah, we'll have to practice. So thank you very much. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to share regarding anything we've spoken about today?
Well, I just wanted to add that Radio Free Asia Uyghur Service is working here both an honor for me, and it's a very unique opportunity. As we all have spoken about, the Uyghur Service is probably the only one in the world right now.
Yes.
So it's very honorable work for myself.
So what we mean when we say that is that our Radio Free Asia is the only news outlet in the world that broadcasts in Uyghur.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. And being part of the Uyghur Service team, it allows me to report on the Uyghur genocide and ensure the world to remain informed about these atrocities. And despite the challenges and risks, including retaliation from the Chinese Communist Party and not being able to go back to my country at all. Mm-hmm. But even with that challenges, I'm really honored to work here and being able to bring awareness, but also being a voice for the Uyghur people that cannot voice their concern is a very unique job and unique position. And I really appreciate that RFA has this service to have this opportunity for Uyghur people. And our commitment to delivering unbiased and factual reporting is a testament to the resilience and strengths of the Uyghur people. And we remain steadfast in our mission to amplify their voices and stories.
All right. Well, I would like to thank you then very much for coming into the studio with us today. And stay tuned for more RFA Insider after this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sherazad.
Oh, yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. You're listening to the RFA Insider podcast, made by two real-life staffers at Radio Free Asia.
If you'd like to send us feedback, there are many ways you can do this.
You can send us an email at insider@rfa.org.
You can comment on our webpage at rfa.org/English/insider. Just click on the episode you're listening to and write your comment below.
Or you can send us a tweet at RFA Insider or visit us in person.
No, don't visit us in person.
Right, don't visit us in person. But anyway, we really want to hear from you.
So tune in every other Friday and we'll take you behind the scenes.
And tell you what the news really means here at RFA Insider. Welcome back to RFA Insider. That was a pretty good conversation that we had with Sherazad from the Uyghur service. A lot to think about. It was very light and friendly, but at the same time very, very heavy, the conversation.
For sure.
And we have to realize that and understand that the situation in the Uyghur region, we may read about it, we may work on stories about it, but, these people who work here, they have people over there that are going through it. So it's not...
Right. Like for them, it's their story.
Yeah. And for someone else, it could just, I'm detached enough where I can be unemotional about it, but at the same time, you have to treat it with respect because this is something that real people are going through. But with that, I think it's time to get into
Podcast Free Asia.
Okay, so first up, we have to advertise another podcast on Radio Free Asia, which is called Master of Deceit, which is about Wang Shujun, a New York resident, citizen of the United States, who is, now guilty of spying for China.
In this episode, we're doing something different. We'll take you to Brooklyn Federal Court to hear what unfolded during the 7-day trial.
The courtroom was quiet. Wang straightened his tie. "Guilty," said the jury on the first count. Then, "Guilty." Wang closed his eyes, the way you do before being struck by someone. "Guilty. Guilty."
Now we're promoting Master of Deceit, episode 4. That is available wherever you get podcasts. All right, another thing that listeners may remember is from episode F, or 4, is we're very superstitious people, and we thought the number 4 was bad luck. So this is episode 13, and 13 is also unlucky.
Oh, okay. All I can think of, isn't that like Taylor Swift's number or something? She always writes it on her hand before she performs.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, is that related to because she's dating the football player and he's number 13?
No.
Is he number 13?
I think it was before that, but that's all I know of the number 13.
Okay, well, but honestly, 13 really never bothered me like 4 does. I mean, there are, in buildings in the U.S., if you go to the 12th floor, the next floor is 14. Have you seen that before?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay. Well, since we live in D.C., buildings usually go up to only level 7 anyway, so that doesn't really matter. But yes, if you go to really tall buildings built, I guess, within the last 100 years, 13 is usually skipped. And a lot of times in horror movies, there will be like this secret 13th floor that nobody ever goes to in a building, and you have to do some code with the buttons to even get to it, and that's the premise of the whole horror movie. But just 13 never really bothered me, so not you either?
Nope.
Okay. Well, then, let's move on. We did get some audience feedback. So this one comes from the Apple Podcasts app. On the Apple Podcasts app, you can rate us. So any of the listeners who want to give us a 5-star rating, you could totally do that.
Or 1 star.
Or 1 star.
All press is good press.
That's true. If you want to talk about how awful we are, you could do that too. But the person who gave us this feedback goes by the name Sax Shooter. Sax shooter, you know? Yeah, you were saying something, sorry.
Oh, I just was going to say, I feel like I should preface this by asking you if this is any relative of yours, Eugene.
No, definitely not a relative of mine.
Okay.
So here's what Sax shooter says. Fun and engaging. Really enjoyed this different take on current stories from Asia. Eugene and Amy make the topics really accessible and bring real voices for us to hear and connect with what's going on in Burma, Tibet, Laos, Thailand, and China. Wow, that's great. Do we talk a lot about Thailand and Burma?
I think I have a hunch about who this is.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing that gives it away kind of is that it's like grammatically correct, and every other comment we've gotten has kind of not been.
And they call us by name, so...
That's true. Okay, but we would like to thank you, Sax Shooter. It really means a lot to us. Again, any kind of encouragement. So those of you in the audience, if you want us to read your comment on the air, answer some questions, or want to criticize us for getting it wrong, please feel free to contact us by any of the ways you can contact, or some of the ways that we didn't recommend, and we will try to read it on the air. And I like Sax Shooter's handle, though if I were into saxophones, I'd have chosen something like Sax Appeal or the Boston Red Sax or something like that.
Sure. I'm laughing silently.
She's laughing at me, not with
Yes.
me. Okay. But with that, let's get into the rundown. Okay, in this post-Olympics edition of the Rundown, so the Olympics just ended this week, and we've seen lots of flag-raising ceremonies and heard many countries' anthems. Well, I have anyway. Have you watched the Olympics very much?
I've watched bits and pieces.
Okay. So I wanted to introduce this segment. I wanted to ask, out of all the anthems you've heard at the Olympics in Paris, or just in your life, which one is your favorite? And no copping out, you can't say the United States.
I'm not copping out, but I've not heard a national anthem that has really made any impression on me.
Really?
Yes.
For me, it's one of the anthems that we didn't hear in Paris because they're actually suspended from competition. That's the anthem of Russia. Like every time I've heard that, it's really moving actually. It's just so well constructed, and you can tell by the melody that these are people that they've seen something, you know? They've been through a lot, and they're still here to tell you about it. But if Russia's anthem wasn't being played in the Olympics this time, why am I even talking about it? And that's where the rabbit hole comes in. So I wanted to make a segment called Down the Rabbit Hole, where like you start somewhere and then I guess whatever you're watching videos on, it takes you to something else, which takes you to something else, which takes you to something else, right?
Are you just justifying your YouTube watch history?
Yes, exactly. So I was watching the Olympics, and during one of the medal ceremonies, the Chinese Taipei anthem comes on. Of course, Chinese Taipei is Taiwan, but they're not allowed to compete as Taiwan. So they have a different alternative Olympic flag that they raise, and then they have to play a different anthem than the actual anthem of Taiwan.
Yes.
So because of that, I got curious, and I thought, I wonder what the actual anthem of Taiwan sounds like. Do you know what it sounds like?
No, like I said before, all anthems just go whoosh.
Okay. All right. So I went to YouTube and I looked for Taiwan's anthem and then played that. And I said, that's a pretty good anthem. And then autoplay took me to another video. And I guess based on my previous searches, the algorithm took me to a video of the Russian anthem. Only this one was a little bit different. Okay, so this is the start of the Russian national anthem. And so then there's 5 ladies, they come out. They begin singing the Russian anthem. They start off a cappella. You can hear like there's a heartbeat sound effect in the back even. Like that.
And like there's like the Russia flag and the North Korea flag.
Yes.
Little logo.
So this was when Vladimir Putin visited visited North Korea maybe a month ago. Or 2 months ago.
Would like a Russian speaker to tell us how well they're singing in Russian.
Okay. But the woman singing right now... This is why this is in my search history, because this is the one we were talking about before from a previous episode where they made that. So the previous episode where we were talking about that song that was praising Kim Jong-un, right? So that's Kim Ryu-kyung, whose name I have trouble pronouncing, and she's killing it, and she's awesome, and I don't know, it's just like this was such a great, wonderful clip, and I was like, that's amazing. Like, I've never heard it sung this way. Like, even when Russians sing their anthem, it's not this amazing and moving. Like this was really like high production value, and there's parts where even like they turn to Kim Jong-un and Putin looks like he's about to cry. Even it's like he's moved by it too. Either that or he's about to pass out because the night before he was actually traveling to North Korea and he was supposed to be there for 2 days, but he actually was like 8 hours late because he was doing something in like a different part of Russia first.
Okay.
And so they had to jam all these like activities into one day, and he probably didn't get enough sleep. So he's either
like sleep deprivation heightens your emotional.
He's either extremely moved
vulnerabilities.
or he's about to pass out because he's really sleepy. But just because we were talking about it before, you were joking about how like I'm a stan of this
Well,
woman.
truly, now this proves that you are.
Yeah. So going further down the rabbit hole, after this, more anthems start playing, and it's all variations on the Russian anthem. And then finally, we end up with one where there's a video about people playing the Russian anthem in front of Putin and failing.
Okay.
And this is just very hilarious.
What do you mean by failing?
Oh, you'll see. In this fail video, there are some pretty bad ones. There's Saudi Arabia, Cambodia, and Egypt that came to mind. I'd go with Cambodia since that's the one of our broadcast countries, but Egypt's is just so spectacularly bad that they take the cake, so I'm going to have to go with that one.
Okay. Why do they sound flat?
I don't know. It's really bad. And you can see that Putin looks
Putin is like the emoji
angry.
of like that human standing really awkwardly.
And then like the guy who's standing next to Putin, he looks like he's about to laugh or bust out laughing because he knows that it's really bad too. So yes, I would like to end the Down the Rabbit Hole segment with this really awesome song. And moving along with the rundown, what do you have for us today?
All right. So you know how when you watch the Olympics, you like totally expect some countries to medal at certain sports?
Yes.
So like, for example, Jamaica and sprinting events.
Right. Especially when Usain Bolt was with the Jamaican team and he broke records seemingly in every competition. Mm-hmm. So the U.S. usually good at like basketball and swimming and almost all track and field events and baseball and ice hockey. And these are ones that we expect them to medal anyway. But, usually the U.S. sends so many athletes and it's kind of dominant overall. So, I mean...
That's a very American take.
No, not necessarily. Like, in this last Olympics, I think we sent the biggest delegation with more than 500 athletes. And then I think we came away with a total of 160-something medals, which, that outpaced everybody. And... if you look at all-time medal standings, I think the U.S. is somewhere in the thousands, whereas the next closest country is somewhere in the 500s. I'm not exactly sure, but that's something,
The U.S. are the jocks of the world.
All right, this is Eugene here. Once again, fact-checking myself. The United States has 3,094 all-time medals, whereas the Soviet Union would be next with 1,204, and Great Britain is next after that with 1,015. If you're talking gold medals only, then the United States has 1,219. The Soviet Union would have 473 next, and then China is next with 325. Yes. So I'm saying when the U.S. gets a medal, it's not like, oh, wow, amazing, great. It's like, okay, another one,
Okay. Yeah. So for China, it's table tennis or ping-pong.
Ping-pong.
And the funny thing is that table tennis was actually invented in the UK, as was, I believe, fencing.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Please podcast free Asian me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
But these days you can expect East Asian countries, especially China, to medal the most when it comes to table tennis. Mm-hmm. So the reason for this is that Mao Zedong, the founder of the People's Republic of China, decided to make table tennis the national sport in the 50s, and he really went heavy on promoting it. And then shortly after that came ping pong diplomacy. ping-pong diplomacy, which was when the US and the PRC used ping-pong to basically break the ice during like this tense time of relations.
Yeah, and if you watch Forrest Gump, there's a whole scene of him taking part in that. It's during the Richard Nixon administration, I believe, prior to China and the United States normalizing relations.
I think like the 70s.
Yeah.
So there are so many great table tennis players in China that they each have their own fan club. And this becomes a problem when they go to the Olympics. So
you're saying each of the individual people have their fan clubs?
Yes, they have like online followings for each player. So 2 of the top Chinese players faced off in Paris. Please forgive me. Chen Meng was the defending champion, and she went up against one of the most popular table tennis players in China, and her name is Sun Yingsha in the final for the women's singles. So Sun's fans very audibly booed Chen whenever she scored during the game, and Chen did end up winning. And Sun's fans took to the internet to post rumors about her, including ones about an inappropriate relationship between her and her coach.
Wait a sec. So this is China versus China in ping pong.
Yes.
And I guess one of the players had fans that were angry at the other one because she was winning or doing well?
One of the players, Sun, was more popular than the current reigning champ, Chen.
Right.
So her fans, I guess, filled up the bleachers.
Okay.
They were like out in full force to like hope that she could win, and she lost to Chen.
Okay. And they were making allegations that she had an inappropriate relationship with her coach. That seems very juvenile.
Well, you know, it's sports. Like,
guess,
there's
but
recordings of, you know, the fans booing Chen whenever she scored during the match. And then, like, you could see people, like, flipping her off in the stands.
Oh, man. That's not nice.
Which, yeah, it's a little ridiculous because they're both Chinese athletes and, like, you want your country to medal during the Olympics. So Beijing police ended up getting involved, and they launched an investigation into the online abuse, and they ended up arresting a woman for posting defamatory comments. And at the same time, Weibo reported that it deleted more than 12,000 posts and banned more than 300 accounts over illegal comments. All this kind of ended up in an official Chinese media outlet reporting that China's internet police would be cracking down more on illegal activities in online sports fans groups, you know, following what happened with this match.
You know, I have to like wonder if there was like a table tennis match that had the US against the US, I think all the fans would be like, wow, we're going to get 1 and 2. That's amazing. Yeah. And you know, because I guess table tennis is not as popular a sport here, but I mean, at the same even if it was like there were 2 teams in a different sport, like the A team and the B team in a baseball competition, if they both made it, people would just say like, wow, the US is so great at baseball.
Yeah.
You know, which
that might speak to how big table tennis really is in China.
Indeed, where depending on which athlete is there, it's really important. So moving on to a lighter note for table tennis, a former Chinese table tennis champion became the oldest table tennis player to win a match at the Olympics. Oh.
So 61-year-old Ni Xia Lian, otherwise known as Auntie Ni, used to play for the Chinese national team in the 80s.
Wow, 61 and an Olympian.
Yes, she's actually like, I think 8 days older than the head coach of the current Chinese national team.
Amazing.
So she won her first round against a Turkish player half her age, I believe a 31-year-old, and then ended up competing against one of the champions, Sun Yingsha, in the second round.
And then she lost.
Yes. Okay. She was greatly defeated, but kind of won over the hearts of everyone watching.
Yeah.
You know, like everyone gave her a standing ovation, and she got a hug from the Grand Duke of Luxembourg, who, the country of which she represents now.
All right. So you mentioned this, and actually there was another kind of senior table tennis player representing Chile, but she was only 58. So that's why nobody's talking about her. But she was also of Chinese descent. And so, you know, I kind of looked into this because I noticed when I was watching table tennis that the women's doubles team representing Germany had 2 Asian women on it, and I looked them up, and they're both born in China. So I looked through all of the singles players anyway, and found out that Chinese-born players represented Slovakia, Canada, Chile, Portugal, Luxembourg, Singapore, Monaco, and France.
Wow.
And then people of Chinese descent, not necessarily born in China, represented Fiji, Germany, the United States, Singapore, and Spain. So China is representing itself very well in table tennis. And on top of that, you have to also consider that there's the Hong Kong players and the Taiwan players playing for Chinese Taipei. So lots of Chinese representation.
I was doing research on this and was on table tennis forums, and people were attributing China's success to the fact that they would have specialty schools where like you'd pull out the best table tennis students or like players as kids and like, you know, still give them schooling, but also like train them from like a very early age to start.
Right. But I wonder what happens to those people who don't make the team, right? Mm-hmm. So in this case, they go, well, I can't play for China. Let's go play for Germany, or let's go play for France or wherever, you know?
Yeah, true. Or you just become like a really formidable like neighborhood table tennis player.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So on that note, that brings us to the end of today's edition of RFA Insider. For Amy Lee, I'm Eugene Hong, and we'll see you next time.
See ya. Like what you hear so far?
Can you spare 3 seconds to help us out?
It'd really mean a lot to us if you would like and subscribe and follow us on whatever platform you're using to listen to us.
We're begging you. We're pleading with you.
Actually, we're just kind of asking nicely.
Yeah, that.